My name is Stephanie Sampson, and I was 34 the year I finally realized my family didn't just overlook me, they had never actually seen me at all. Not once. Not really. I grew up believing invisibility was simply my default setting. Oldest of three kids, the one who did what she was supposed to do without being asked, the quiet fixer who never took up too much space. My mother raised us alone after my dad died when I was 10, and I respected her for surviving that storm. I still do, in a complicated, bittersweet kind of way. But respect isn't the same thing as belonging. And belonging, well, that was a luxury I never quite earned in her eyes. Mom was the kind of woman who believed real jobs came with name tags or security badges, something you could point to and say, look, she's respectable. So when I became a remote freelance software developer, comfortable income, flexible hours work, I genuinely enjoyed. She decided it wasn't a real career. She treated it the way you'd treat a hobby. Someone should have outgrown by adulthood. She said that to my face once. I laughed at the time, but it stuck. Growing up, I was the reliable daughter. Not the golden child that was my younger sister Kayla Mom's favorite from the moment she arrived. Bright-haired and loud-laughed, the kind of kid who could spill an entire gallon of juice on the carpet and still be told, "Oh, honey, accidents happen." Meanwhile, if a pencil went missing, Mom looked at me first. Then there was Mason, the middle child, 3 years younger than me. He was the only one who ever called Mom out, the only one who recognized the lopsided balance of affection in the house. But even he got tired of arguing with her, of being painted as the ungrateful son. He eventually moved to Oregon as far as he could get while staying in the country. He said it was for work, but I knew better. That left me, the stay-close daughter, the helper, the one who picked up the slack because it caused fewer tremors in the house. If a bill needed sorting, I handled it. If Kayla needed help covering rent before moving back home, I sent money. When Mom struggled with online banking, I spent an entire weekend teaching her how to navigate tabs and menus, setting up accounts, and linking utilities. That included opening a joint savings account, her idea initially, but I ended up managing it. She'd call me her tech girl with this half-dismissing smile as if I were the household gadget instead of her daughter. And like an idiot, I kept hoping that one day she'd look at me and not just see the utility, but the person. I kept showing up. Birthdays, holidays, graduations. I was the dependable background character in a story where Kayla was always center stage. And honestly, a part of me thought that was okay. A part of me thought that if I just kept the peace long enough, she'd finally say something meaningful, something that sounded like gratitude or pride. Then came the phone call that shattered whatever illusions I had left. It was late July, a Thursday. I had been debugging a client app for 3 hours, eyes burning, when my phone rang. Mom's name flashed across the screen. She rarely called unless she needed something. But her voice was bright, almost excited. "Sweetheart, I want to talk about my birthday," she said. "The big 6-0. Kayla's planning a nice dinner downtown. We got a private room. It's going to be very special." Her excitement startled me. Mom always pretended birthdays were childish beneath her. But a private room. A full dinner. Mason flying in from Oregon. She sounded almost proud. "You're coming, right?" she asked like it was a dare. I said yes, of course. I even smiled. I rearranged deadlines, booked flights, reserved a rental car, picked out a new dress, because stupidly I thought maybe this time I'd be photographed with the family instead of behind them. Even my boyfriend Adam, who had seen firsthand how draining my family could be, told me he hoped it would go well. "Maybe it's a turning point," he said gently. I wanted to believe him. I landed in Seattle Saturday evening, tired but still hopeful, picked up the rental, checked into a modest hotel, then stopped by a florist to buy Mom her favorite lilies. I didn't want to show up empty-handed, not on her milestone birthday. I told myself that this dinner could be the reset we all needed, a clean slate, a chance for her to see me without Kayla's shadow over everything. The restaurant was tucked inside a renovated brick building with flickering candles on every table and a menu that probably charged $20 for air. I arrived 2 minutes before the reservation, some 58 p.m. sharp. The hostess recognized Mom's name. "Oh, the private room party," she said. "They're already seated. Already seated, already eating, already celebrating." My stomach tightened, but I pushed it down. Maybe they just got drinks early. Maybe they were waiting for me to begin. She led me to the back hallway. I heard laughter. Kayla's voice ringing loudest as always. My heartbeat quickened. I adjusted the lilies in my arm, smoothed the wrinkles from my dress, and pushed the door open with a hopeful little smile, and froze. They were halfway through appetizers, every plate half empty, wine glasses glimmering under soft lights, 15 people around the table, including Kayla's friends who didn't even know Mom. And there at the center of it all sat my mother, laughing, wearing pearls I'd never seen. No one turned towards the door. No one said my name. No one even paused. I stepped forward, voice small. Hey, sorry I'm late. Flight delays. Kayla glanced up and gave a tiny wave. Mom looked straight at me, and then looked away, speaking to someone beside her as if I were a waiter passing by. I forced a smile and held out the lilies. Brought these for you. She didn't even touch them. She gestured for someone behind her to take them away like clutter. I scanned the table. My name wasn't on any card. My seat, my usual place next to Mason, was occupied by a man I didn't recognize. Kayla leaned in. Oh, Stephanie, this is Jordan, my new boyfriend. We gave him your seat. It was kind of last minute. I blinked. My seat. Mom finally looked at me, then her face serene, her voice soft, but razor sharp. This dinner is for people who actually matter. I felt the words slice straight into my chest. And in that instant, the quiet, hopeful little part of me died. I didn't scream. I didn't cry. I didn't throw the lilies. I simply turned, walked out, and didn't look back. When I stepped back into the cool night air outside the restaurant, the world felt strangely muffled, like someone had turned down the volume on reality. Cars passed. People laughed. Glasses clinked behind me. Life went on. But inside my chest, everything was silent and hollow. I walked to my rental car without really remembering the path my feet took. My hands shook as I unlocked the door. I slid into the driver's seat, shut the door, and sat there in darkness, with only the faint glow of the dashboard lighting my face. I hadn't even taken a breath yet. Mom's words kept replaying, slow and poisonous. This dinner is for people who actually matter. It didn't matter that she'd never said anything quite that cruel to me before. It didn't matter that I'd flown across the country. It didn't matter that the lilies I'd handpicked were probably wilting on a stainless steel countertop in the kitchen right now. What mattered was that she'd finally said aloud what she'd been implying my entire life. I wasn't one of them. I opened my phone. A message blinked across the screen. Adam. Made it to the dinner. How's everything going, Steph? I stared at the words. They felt like a hand reaching out through smoke. I didn't reply. I couldn't. Not when I felt so small I was scared my own voice would come out cracked in half. 10 minutes passed, then 20. I didn't cry. Not then, not yet. My hands finally moved on their own, starting the car, pulling out of the lot, driving back to the hotel through streets I barely registered. I think I hit a red light, maybe two. I don't know. I just remember the overwhelming ache in my throat, the kind that comes from swallowing too many emotions too fast. When I made it back to my hotel room, I dropped the car key on the nightstand, peeled off my dress, and stepped into the shower. The water hit my skin like needles. That's when the tears came. Not in sobs, those would come later, but in silent, steady streams that tasted like exhaustion and humiliation. When I finally sat on the bed in a towel, damp hair sticking to my shoulders, I felt blank, emotionless, like someone had unplugged me. The lilies, the forgotten name card, Jordan smiling in my seat, my mother's pearls glinting as she turned away from me. I reached for my laptop with a strange calm, the kind that follows emotional implosion, cold, clear, surgical. I opened the bank portal. The joint account I'd set up for her was sitting right there, her entire savings. The deposits she never knew how to track. The automatic transfers I'd built for her. Every emergency fund, every bit of financial support I had quietly stabilized for years. A lifeline I'd built. I looked at the number. I didn't feel anger, or guilt, or vindication. I felt clarity. The kind that only comes when someone finally tells you the truth about your place in their life. My fingers hovered, paused, clicked. Transfer funds, full balance, confirm. The number vanished. I shut the laptop, and for the first time in 34 years, I didn't feel like the daughter who owed them anything. By morning, the storm arrived. My phone buzzed at 6:04 a.m., then again, and again. When I finally picked it up, the lock screen was a wall of missed calls. 32 of them. Messages from Mom, Kayla, even Jordan, and Mason, his tone different from the rest. Mom, Stephanie, please call me immediately. Kayla, are you insane? You just stole Mom's savings. Jordan, I don't know you, but this is wrong. Mom, you don't understand what you've done. Kayla, grow up. You embarrassed us last night. Mason, hey, I just woke up. What happened? They're freaking out. I dropped the phone onto the hotel bed and stared at the ceiling. The panic crackling through my screen should have made me feel guilty. Instead, it felt like background noise, like a radio someone left on in another room. Another message came in. Adam Steph. Are you okay? I'm getting worried. That one hurt. Because he cared. Because he always had. I typed a reply. Deleted it. Typed another. Deleted that one too. How was I supposed to explain that my mother had looked straight at me and told me I didn't matter? A sharp buzz, my phone vibrated again. Incoming call, Mason. I hesitated, then answered. His voice came through, rushed, breathless, like he'd stepped outside to escape the chaos. Steph, finally. What the hell happened? Mom's crying. Kayla's losing her mind. Jordan's yelling about financial crimes. They all woke me up at 6. I swallowed. The words barely pushed through. They gave my seat to him, Mason. To a man I've never met. And Mom, I paused because saying it aloud made it real. She said the dinner was for people who mattered. Silence, a long, heavy silence. Then Mason exhaled slow and pained. I'm so sorry, Steph. His voice cracked. And for a second, I felt something fragile inside me loosen, like his apology was the first real acknowledgement I'd received from our family in years. Did you really transfer all the money? He finally asked. Every dollar. He let out a low whistle. Damn. I waited for judgment, for him to say I'd gone too far. Instead, I'm proud of you. I closed my eyes. You don't even want to know the amount, I whispered. I don't care about the money, Mason said. I care about you. My throat tightened. He'd never said anything like that before, not because he didn't feel it, just because our family wasn't built for tenderness. Mom's demanding you return it, he added. She said it's hers. I laughed, bitterly. Of course she did. And she's planning to use it for Kayla's future wedding expenses. My eyes snapped open. Her second wedding. Yeah. Jordan brought up the idea last week, apparently. A long, cold silence settled between us. Mom erased me from the birthday I flew across the country for, to save money for Kayla's next wedding. My humiliation had been premeditated, calculated. And suddenly everything inside me shifted. I wasn't the villain in this story. I wasn't the ungrateful daughter. I wasn't the problem. I was simply the one who finally saw the truth. Mason's voice softened. She wants a family meeting tonight. I almost laughed. Yeah, I said. Hard pass. Another long pause, then, You doing okay? No, I whispered. But I will be. Good, he murmured. I've got your back, no matter what. We hung up. I sat there in the quiet hotel room staring at my phone as dozens more messages appeared. Threats, demands, manipulation disguised as concern. But all of it, every word felt distant. Because my mother was right about one thing. The dinner was for people who mattered. I had simply stopped being one of them. The messages didn't slow down. If anything, they intensified, sharp and frantic like bees swarming a hive they suddenly realized was empty. Mom, Stephanie, we need to talk. Now. You don't understand what you've done. That money was for my future. Kayla, you ruined everything. Jordan is furious. He said he doesn't want drama in his family. You need to put that money back before you get arrested. Arrested. The irony made my jaw clench. Arrest me for touching an account with my own name on it. For money I had mostly put there myself. Then another vibration, a calmer, softer tone. Adam, baby, please let me know you're okay. I'm worried. His message was the only one that didn't feel like a demand. It didn't claw at me. It didn't accuse me. It was simply care. But I still couldn't respond. Not yet. Not when my emotions were a tangled mess of clarity, anger, grief, humiliation, and something new, something sharp-edged and unrecognizable. Resolve. I finally left the hotel late that morning. The Seattle air was warm, early summer, clinging to the city. I drove aimlessly until I reached a park overlooking Lake Union. I parked, walked until I found an empty bench, then sat. A dog chased a ball nearby. Boats hummed across the water. People existed in peace. Meanwhile, my phone was a war zone. I scrolled through the group chat, a dumpster fire of panic, self-pity, and entitlement. Mom, you stole from me. I will not tolerate this disrespect. Kayla, you embarrassed us last night. Jordan's parents think our family is unstable now. Fix this. And then Mason, I'm stepping away from the group chat. This is going nowhere. I sighed, hard. Then my phone rang. Not Kayla, not Mom. Adam. My thumb hovered. I could have ignored him. But the guilt of shutting him out twisted in my stomach, so I answered. His voice came through warm, careful, like he was afraid I might break. Steph, finally. I've been worried sick. What's going on? I leaned back on the bench, staring at clouds drifting lazily overhead. My mother humiliated me at her birthday dinner, I said quietly, in front of everyone. A beat of silence. Oh, sweetheart. And I walked out. Then I took back all the money from the joint account. Another pause. Not judgment, just processing. Did they hurt you? He asked. My throat tightened. Not physically, I whispered. Just everything else. I told him about the empty seat, Jordan sitting in it, the way Mom didn't look at me when I handed her the lilies. Her words, those 7 words that cracked something deep inside me. This dinner is for people who matter. Adam didn't say anything for a long while. Then, you do matter, Steph. She's wrong. She's always been wrong. His voice didn't crack. Mine did. We sat in silence until I could breathe again. Then he said something I didn't expect. You know, my ex used to do that. I frowned. Do what? Make me feel small. Remind me I didn't matter unless I was useful. It took years to realize she didn't love me. She loved what I could do for her. My heart twisted. I'm so sorry you went through that. It's why I recognize what your mom does, he said softly. It's subtle. It's emotional erosion. You don't see it happening until you're standing in the rubble. I didn't realize tears had slid down my cheek until the wind cooled them. You're not crazy for taking that money back, he continued. You were reclaiming what you've been giving away your whole life. Reclaiming. The words sank into me like warm stone. Before I could respond, another call came through Mom. I declined it. Another Kayla. Declined. Again, Mom. Declined. Then a text from Mom. If you don't return that money, I will press charges. Adam inhaled sharply when I read it aloud. She can't, he said. Your name is on the account. She thinks she can guilt-trip me into crawling back, I muttered. She always has. What are you going to do? I stared out at the water, steady, calm, everything I wasn't. What was I going to do? I wasn't the type to lash out blindly. I wasn't impulsive. I didn't hurt people just to hurt them. But I also wasn't going to let them rewrite the narrative. Not this time. I'm going to protect myself, I said. Guilt flickered quickly, replaced by that new, sharp-edged resolve. I hung up with Adam only after promising I'd call him later. He didn't push. He didn't demand. He simply said, I'm here, Steph. Always. His steadiness made everything inside me ache with gratitude. Once the call ended, I opened my laptop again. If Mom wanted to make this legal fine, I'd be ready. I pulled up years of bank statements, receipts, messages, every transfer, every deposit, every... Can you cover this until Friday? Every time I bailed someone out without asking for a cent in return. The numbers didn't lie. Most of the money in the joint account had come from me. Quiet loans, unpaid debts, support disguised as responsibility. If she dragged us into court, she would be forced to sit under fluorescent lights and explain in front of strangers how thousands of dollars labeled for Mom suddenly became stolen money. I wasn't afraid. For the first time in my entire life, I wasn't afraid of her disappointment, or her anger, or her tears, because I finally saw them for what they were. Control mechanisms, nothing more. Hours later, the sun began dipping behind the skyline and my phone went silent. Not because they had stopped fighting, but because I think they no longer knew what to say. The silence tasted unfamiliar. Not peaceful, not painful. Just new. That night, as I walked back to my car, I understood something with absolute clarity. My mother wasn't grieving the money. She was grieving the loss of control. And she would do anything to get it back. But for the first time in my life, I wasn't playing that role anymore. I wasn't the fixer. I wasn't the buffer. I wasn't the daughter who carried everything quietly just to maintain peace. I wasn't even the invisible one. I was the one who left the table, and I wasn't coming back. When I flew back to Austin the next morning, the clouds outside the airplane window looked like stitched layers of cotton, soft, harmless, peaceful. Nothing like the storm brewing in my life. But maybe that was the point. The world didn't stop just because mine had cracked. My apartment greeted me the same way it always had, quiet, dim. Lived in, a little cluttered from the week's rushed preparation. I closed the door behind me and leaned against it, letting the weight of everything settle across my shoulders. I didn't cry. Not because I wasn't hurt, but because the hurt had dug too deep to surface yet. I set my suitcase aside, walked into my bedroom, and sat down on the floor, still wearing my jeans and jacket like my body had shut down before my brain could catch up. The silence was thick, heavy. Eventually, I crawled into bed without brushing my teeth, without changing clothes, without turning off the lights. I slept for 12 hours straight. The next week was a fog. Emails went unanswered. Client messages piled up. Deadlines drifted past like passing trains I couldn't bring myself to chase. When I opened my laptop, my fingers hovered over the keyboard but refused to move. Every task felt like dragging concrete. The humiliation from the birthday dinner replayed in loops. Kayla laughing. Jordan in my seat. Mom's voice. This dinner is for people who actually matter. Every time the memory surfaced, it left me breathless. I barely left the apartment except to buy coffee or microwave meals. I lived off roasted chicken and instant ramen. A mountain of laundry grew in the corner. My plants started wilting. Even my hair looked tired. Every morning, Adam texted me. Adam. Good morning. I'm thinking about you. Adam. Please eat something today. Adam. Call me when you're ready. No pressure. He didn't push. He didn't pry. Just stayed present in the background like a steady heartbeat. Once he sent a photo of his dog sprawled across his couch, drooling on the cushions with the caption, "He says you're allowed to feel like crap, but not starve." For the first time in days, I almost smiled. But I still couldn't bring myself to call. Not yet. My mother had trained me too well in silence, in shrinking, in being small and non-inconvenient. So when my emotions grew too big, I instinctively withdrew from everyone, including the people who actually cared. Especially them. 4 days after I returned home, a small envelope arrived in my mailbox. No return address. Inside was a folded sheet of paper in sloppy cursive handwriting I recognized instantly. Mason. I unfolded it carefully. Steph, I know you don't want to talk right now, and I'm not going to force it, but I want you to know I saw everything. I saw how they treated you, and it wasn't okay. None of it. You've carried this family more than anyone realizes, and if they're too blind to see that that's not on you. I'm proud of you for finally drawing a line. You matter. You always have. We just forgot to say it. I'm sorry for that. Mason. I read it 3 times. Never once did he ask about the money. Never once did he tell me to make peace. He simply acknowledged my pain. That was all I needed. I cried then, not loud, not messy, not dramatic. Just a quiet release that softened something stiff and aching in my chest. 2 days later, I made a decision. I needed help. Not from Adam, not from Mason, not from anyone who shared my blood. I needed someone who could untangle the knots my mother had tied inside me. I booked a therapy session. During the first appointment, I sat stiffly on the couch while a gentle-spoken woman named Dr. Reynolds asked me why I was there. I told her everything. The dinner, the money, the years of being invisible, the guilt, the exhaustion, the strange blend of liberation and grief. When I finished, she didn't look shocked or judgmental. She simply said, "Stephanie, you're not selfish for wanting to be treated with dignity, and you're not cruel for setting boundaries. That's not betrayal, that's survival." Her words cracked something open that I didn't even know was sealed shut. I left the session lighter, not healed, not fixed, but heard. That night, for the first time since the dinner, I picked up my journal, a gift from Adam last Christmas. I had used maybe 3 pages. I wrote until my wrist hurt. Memories spilled out that I hadn't touched in years. The time Mom forgot to pick me up from choir rehearsal because Kayla had a volleyball game. The time Mason defended me and she said he was being dramatic. The way she called my job computer tinkering every Thanksgiving. The countless holidays where I quietly paid for decorations, groceries, presents, and never once received acknowledgement. The more I wrote, the more the fog in my head cleared. Pain that had been shapeless finally took form. And once it took form, I could finally confront it. A week later, my work laptop finally opened without dread. I answered overdue emails. I apologized for delays. Most clients were understanding. A few weren't. But I was back, slowly, carefully, like someone relearning how to walk after an injury. And then something unexpected happened. One of my anonymous blog posts written during a sleepless night went mildly viral. The post was titled, "The Empty Chair." It wasn't about my mother specifically, or Kayla, or the money. It was about that moment of walking into a room expecting to be welcomed and realizing you were never meant to be there at all. Comments poured in. This is my childhood in words. I didn't know other people felt this invisible. Thank you for writing this. For the first time in my life, strangers saw me more clearly than my own family ever had. A week later, I got a DM from a mid-sized digital content producer. "Your writing is powerful. We'd like to feature your story anonymous if you prefer. Are you open to talking?" I stared at the message for a long time. Me, Stephanie Sampson, the invisible daughter, the one they pushed aside and talked over. Someone thought my story mattered. I sat in my quiet apartment phone, glowing in my hand, heart beating softly but steadily. For the first time in a long time, I didn't feel hollow. I felt visible. And visibility, real visibility, was dangerous. Because if I could tell my story, my mother's version of the narrative, the one she'd enforced for decades, might finally crack. And she would not tolerate that. A quiet thrill ran through me. This wasn't revenge. This was reclamation. And I wasn't done yet. I said yes. To the producer. To being interviewed. To telling my story, not as a daughter seeking sympathy, but as a woman, finally stepping out of the shadows she'd been raised to live inside. We filmed the episode over a weekend. No bright artificial sets, no dramatic reenactments. Just me, seated on a simple stool in a quiet studio with soft lighting that didn't try to make me look smaller or larger, just human. A producer asked gentle, open-ended questions, and I answered with honesty I didn't know I had in me. I didn't name my mother, or Kayla, or Jordan. I didn't use last names. I didn't identify the restaurant or show the bank statements. But the story was unmistakably mine. I spoke about the dinner, the empty chair, the lilies tossed aside, the way the moment carved something out of me I could never put back. I spoke about emotional labor, being the dependable child, the overlooked daughter, the one who shows up and gets nothing but silence in return. I ended the interview with a line that had lived inside me since that night. When someone tells you that you don't matter, believe them. Then show them quietly, fully, just how much you do. When the episode aired, I expected a mild ripple. I did not expect a tidal wave. Within hours, views began climbing. Within a day, tens of thousands. Within a week, my face, my story was everywhere on the channel. The comments were a stunning chorus of recognition. This is my family. I have felt this all my life. Thank you for saying what I never could. People shared it, people related to it, people saw me. And all of that would have been overwhelming enough on its own. But then the universe decided to serve me dessert. A thick envelope appeared in my apartment mailbox one afternoon, nestled between a credit card offer and a local grocery flyer. The return address stopped me cold. Kayla and Jordan save the date. Of course. Of course, this was the moment she chose to send it. I brought it inside, peeled the flap open, and pulled out a glossy card, so extravagantly designed it looked like it had been dipped in Instagram filters. But the kicker wasn't the date, wasn't the location, wasn't even Kayla's nauseatingly bubbly caption at the bottom. No. It was the line printed in gold foil. We kindly request monetary gifts to support our new life together. Monetary gifts. Monetary gifts. After everything. After the birthday dinner. After the humiliation. After Mom's threats. After being told I didn't matter. They wanted money. I actually laughed. A single breathless, absurd laugh that echoed off my kitchen walls. They weren't just inviting me. They were expecting me to fund the next chapter of their fairy tale. But I didn't throw the invitation away. I placed it neatly beside my mother's apology letter, the one where she'd told me she missed her daughter, but conveniently forgot to mention the cruelty she'd inflicted. Two relics of a family that believed I would never stop giving. They were about to learn otherwise. 2 days after the wedding invitation arrived, the fallout from the video began. It started small, a message from Mason. Mason, Steph, did you do something? Kayla's blowing up my phone? I blinked. I typed, "What do you mean?" A minute later came a voice memo of Mason laughing so hard he almost choked. I pressed play. She watched the interview. She knows it's about her and Mom. Jordan's parents saw it too. They're asking questions. Steph, she's losing her mind. I didn't smile, not fully. But a slow warmth spread across my chest. A warmth that felt like justice, quiet, cold, overdue. Another text followed. Mason, she said, and I quote, "How dare she make me look like a bad sister?" Then, Mom is furious, but she can't say anything publicly without revealing the truth. So that's why she hadn't contacted me. If she acknowledged the episode, she'd be admitting to everything I'd said. She couldn't correct the narrative without confirming it. For the first time in her life, my mother was trapped in silence. That evening, as the sun dipped low and painted the sky dusty gold, my phone buzzed again. This time from Kayla. Her message contained only 4 words. "What did you do?" Just that. No greeting, no accusation, no exclamation marks. Which meant something far more satisfying than rage. Fear. She knew she couldn't destroy me the way she always had, not this time. Not when the world was watching. Not when the truth was outveiled, but unmistakable. I didn't answer her, not out of spite, but because the version of me who would have scrambled to explain, to soften, to apologize, she didn't exist anymore. Instead, I crafted something else. Something precise. Something symbolic. Something that reflected exactly what they had given me all my life. Nothing. I made a donation in Kayla's name to a nonprofit that supported survivors of emotional neglect and familial estrangement. A generous one. Then I sent her the digital receipt with no subject line, no note. Just the truth wrapped in silence. Minutes later, I saw the familiar typing. Bubble appear beneath her name. It blinked, disappeared, appeared again, then vanished entirely. She had no words. Good. The next morning, Mason called again. She had a meltdown, he said, trying and failing to sound sympathetic. Jordan's mom apparently asked why she didn't invite her supportive older sister to wedding planning. Jordan didn't know what to say. Kayla screamed at him for an hour. I pinched the bridge of my nose. I didn't mention her name, or his. Nope, Mason said. Didn't need to. Turns out truth doesn't need a name tag. A pause. Then his voice softened. I'm proud of you, Steph. I swallowed. Thank you, I whispered. I meant it. Then he added, Mom's not done, though. I closed my eyes. Of course she wasn't. My mother never stopped until she felt she'd reclaimed control. What did she say, I asked? A rustle on his end, maybe he was pacing. She said. He hesitated. Congratulations, Stephanie. You finally made yourself the center of attention. I exhaled slowly through my nose. It wasn't an olive branch, it wasn't anger, it wasn't love. It was resentment, pure and simple. The resentment of a woman who realized the daughter she ignored had built something she couldn't manipulate. She's wrong, you know, Mason added. For what? For thinking you did this for attention. You told the truth. That's all. I felt a sting behind my eyes, not tears, recognition. Mason, I whispered. I think she finally understands she can't control me anymore. He hummed. I think that scares her more than anything. And maybe he was right. Because even before the wedding, even before the final confrontation, I could feel approaching like a shift in the air. I knew one thing with absolute certainty. My mother hadn't lost money. She'd lost power. And for a woman like her, that was a far greater tragedy. The reckoning had only just begun. Kayla's silence didn't last long. Neither did my mother's. 3 days after Mason told me about her comment. Congratulations, Stephanie. You finally made yourself the center of attention. A new envelope appeared in my mailbox. Not thick, not decorative, not gilded like the wedding invitation. Just a plain white envelope, my name written in shaky cursive. My mother's handwriting. I stood in my kitchen, holding it like it contained something radioactive. A letter from her was never simply a letter. It was a weapon, a probe, a test, an attempt to pull me back into orbit. Still, I opened it. One line, one final attempt to reclaim the narrative. I'm done trying. You win. Hope it was worth it. No apology, no reflection, no acknowledgement that she had hurt me. Just surrender laced with accusation. A white flag dipped in poison. I read the sentence again. You win. As if this were a game. As if I had been competing. As if my pain were part of some long strategic battle. As if I wanted victory instead of peace. As if she hadn't thrown the first stone, then the second, then the third, while I just stood still, hoping the storm would pass. It was the emotional equivalent of someone burning a house down and then saying, Fine. Be homeless. Your choice. For a moment, the letter trembled between my fingers. Then I took a lighter from the drawer, walked onto my balcony, and set the note aflame. The flame caught, instantly curling the paper inward, turning her words to ash. I didn't watch the whole thing. I didn't need to. I walked inside before it fully burned out. It wasn't spite, it wasn't triumph. It was closure. A ritual, a release, a choice. Whatever remained of her words, a black curl of paper, a smudge of ash, I let the evening wind carry it away. But closure doesn't come all at once. It comes in echoes, in tremors, in the quiet moments when you find yourself staring at a ceiling you've seen 1,000 times and realizing for the first time that you are free. And then almost as if the universe knew I needed a distraction, my life began to shift. Not dramatically, not explosively, quietly. The digital course project I'd been collaborating on, the one my old mentor invited me into, launched. We titled it, Boundaries and Balance, Rebuilding Your Life Without Burning Out. The name was his idea, but the content, that was me. Everything I'd learned from a lifetime of being the invisible daughter. Every quiet wound, every boundary I'd failed to set, every step I'd taken back toward myself. The first week after launch, I made more money than I usually made in 2 months. People reached out with messages that floored me. I finally set a boundary with my mother after 37 years. Your words helped me realize I wasn't crazy. Thank you for giving language to something I thought only I felt. Not fame, not validation, something deeper. Purpose. My inbox became a small universe of strangers who understood the kind of pain I never thought I'd articulate. And then 9 days after the course launched, I got an email from the producer who had filmed my interview. Subject, your episode hit 2.1 million views. 2.1 million. My heart thudded against my ribs. The interview wasn't about revenge. It wasn't a takedown piece. I didn't expose names or places, but the truth resonated because millions of people had lived a version of it. Millions had been invisible children. Millions had been dismissed. Millions had been told implicitly or explicitly that their worth depended on how useful they were. and something inside me warmed at the thought that maybe finally something good was coming from all the hurt. I didn't tell my mother, I didn't tell Kayla, but they found out anyway. Of course they did. The first one to break the silence was unsurprisingly Kayla. She sent a text so long it looked like a manifesto. Kayla, I hope you're happy. Jordan's family is questioning everything now. Do you know how humiliating that is? You made people think our family is toxic. I stared at the text, then typed. I didn't make them think anything. Sent. For the first time in our lives, she had no immediate comeback. 5 minutes later, Kayla, you've ruined the wedding. Ah, there it was. The true grievance. Not my pain, not the humiliation at the dinner, not the money. Her image, her spotlight, her perfect little fairy tale, which had always required me to shrink in order for her to shine. Another message followed, unhinged and furious. Kayla, you wanted attention. Congratulations. You got it. Before I could even process it, another break came through. Mom is calling. I let it ring. Then again. Declined. Then again. Declined. Then, Mom, just stop. Please stop this. Enough is enough. Enough. As if I'd started it. As if I'd ever had the power to wound them the way they'd wounded me. I tossed my phone onto the couch and took a long breath, and then a soft buzz. A different tone. Adam's still here if you need me. Not going anywhere. My chest tightened. For weeks I had kept him at a distance, not because he didn't care, but because I was terrified that letting someone in would make me smaller again. But Adam wasn't like them. He didn't demand. He didn't guilt trip. He didn't push me to forgive or forget. He simply remained. A gentle presence. A steady heartbeat in the background of the chaos. So I called him. He answered on the first ring. Steph. His voice softened the moment he heard my breath hitch. I got the letter, I whispered, from my mom. What did it say? That she's done trying. That I won. That she hopes it was worth it. Adam exhaled slowly. Was it? I thought about that. The burning letter. The growing platform. The strangers who found comfort in my story. The absence of constant emotional manipulation. The freedom. I nodded, even though he couldn't see it. Yes, I said quietly. It was worth it. Then he said something that hit deeper than he knew. You didn't win, Steph. You survived, and that's not the same thing. A tear slipped down my cheek. Not grief, not anger. Recognition. I'm proud of you, he added, for stepping away from something that hurt you. That takes more strength than staying. The words washed over me like warm water. Strength. A word I had never applied to myself. But maybe, just maybe, it fit. That night, for the first time since my mother's birthday dinner, I slept without nightmares. No empty chair, no lilies tossed aside, no whispered comments that cut deeper than screams. Just rest. Deep, heavy, healing rest. But peace has its own price. And as I woke the next morning, sunlight spilling across my sheets, I knew something was coming. The final confrontation. Not loud, not dramatic. Just inevitable. The last thread between me and my old life was thinning. And soon, it would break. I knew the final thread would snap eventually. I just didn't know it would happen on a Sunday morning. Sunlight warm on my face. The air somehow lighter than it had felt in months, like the universe was reminding me that endings don't always come wrapped in thunder. It began with a knock on my door. 3 slow, hesitant taps. I froze. Mothers don't knock like that. Neither do sisters. For a moment, I wondered if it might be a neighbor, a delivery someone selling solar panels. But when I opened the door, there stood Mason, hands in his pockets, eyebrows drawn, eyes tired but soft. Hey, he said. I didn't hesitate. I pulled him into a hug. It surprised him. It surprised me. It surprised the part of my heart that had always braced for distance, even from the people who loved me. He hugged me back. We talked inside over coffee I barely remembered how to brew. He sat at my kitchen counter, glancing around my apartment the way older brothers do, checking for signs that someone they care about is slipping. He didn't find any. Mom told me she sent you that letter, he finally said. I burned it, I replied. He snorted. Good. We sat in silence for a moment before he spoke again, more carefully this time. Steph, she's not okay. I nodded. I know. She's spiraling. Not because of the money, because she can't make sense of losing control. She keeps saying she doesn't recognize you anymore. A small quiet ache formed in my chest. She never recognized me to begin with, I said. Not really. He didn't argue. Instead, he pulled an envelope out of his jacket and slid it toward me. A photo peeked from the top. I pulled it out and blinked in surprise. It was a scan of an old drawing. My drawing. A 12-year-old Stephanie sitting at a computer, headphones on stars scribbled around her head like a halo, and below it, in wide slanted handwriting, one day everyone will know what I can do. I looked up at Mason. I found it in an old box Mom kept, he said. buried under piles of Kayla's dance trophies. That stung. Of course it did. Why did you give this to me? I whispered. Because you were right, he said. Everyone knows now. My throat tightened. Steph, I'm proud of you, he added, for surviving us, for choosing yourself, and for telling the truth even if no one else wanted to hear it. I swallowed hard. It wasn't forgiveness, it wasn't an apology. It was acknowledgement, the thing I'd been starved for all my life. When Mason left that afternoon, the apartment felt different. Not bigger, not smaller, just mine. My life was no longer something I walked through on autopilot. It had direction now, shape, color, meaning. Not because of the video or the course or the messages from strangers, but because I had finally stepped out of the role my family had written for me. And I began to realize something. I wasn't rebuilding. I was building for the first time. In the weeks that followed, things unfolded quietly. The interview continued to gain traction. Podcasts reached out. Mental health advocates contacted me. A small conference invited me to speak about emotional burnout and invisible labor. My freelance work surged. My course kept selling. My inbox filled with stories from people who saw themselves in mine. Not fame, not notoriety. Impact. Every day I woke up with purpose, my own purpose tied to no one's expectations but mine. And through it all, Adam remained a steady presence. Gentle, attentive, patient in a way that made my chest ache with something I hadn't allowed myself to feel for a long time: safety. He never asked me to forgive my mother. He never suggested I fix things. He never implied I owed anyone reconciliation. He met me where I was. And one night as we sat on my couch, his arm draped warmly around my shoulders, he said, you didn't just walk away from your family, Steph. You walked toward yourself. That's harder. I didn't answer. I didn't need to. I just leaned into him, letting his words settle into the parts of me still learning how to heal. It was sometime around early fall when the last message came from my mother. No letter this time. No accusations. No passive-aggressive commentary. Just a single text. Mom, we don't talk anymore. I guess that's what you wanted. I stared at the screen, then typed, I wanted to matter. Sent. Then I turned off my phone, placed it face down on the table, and let the silence swallow the moment whole. There was no reply. There would never be. And for the first time in my entire life, the silence didn't hurt. It felt like release. Months later, I was invited to speak at a small creative entrepreneurship event in Dallas. Nothing big, nothing flashy, just a room of people trying to make something of themselves in a world that often demands too much and gives too little. I stood on stage lights, low, microphone, cool in my hand, looking out at rows of faces. Faces that weren't judging me, weren't comparing me, weren't deciding my worth by whether I fit their story. I spoke about burnout, about boundaries, about choosing emotional safety over obligation. And at the end, during the Q&A, someone raised their hand and asked, "What made you start telling your story?" The room quieted. I took a breath, then answered the only way I could. Because for most of my life, I begged for a seat at someone else's table, a table where I was tolerated, not valued. So I stopped asking. And I built my own table instead. The room fell silent. Not shocked silence, not pity silence. Understanding silence. The kind that fills the air when a truth lands exactly where it needs to. When the event ended, as people walked up to thank me or share their own experiences, I realized something profound. My mother's dinner had been the end of one life, but also the beginning of another. A life in which I wasn't invisible. A life in which I wasn't a placeholder. A life I created piece by piece with boundaries made of truth instead of exhaustion. I walked outside into the late afternoon sun, warm, steady, golden. And I knew with absolute certainty that I was never going back. Not to the silence, not to the shrinking, not to the table where there was never a place for me. I had built my own, and the view from here was finally mine.